Hello, it is Thursday night and we are still in Fun February, and tonight is all about royal icing. So if you are a cookie decorator and you struggle with anything, it's probably royal icing because that is always the hardest thing. So what I thought I would do is I would share with you my royal icing 101 class. So I'm going to show that tonight, and it will be available until tomorrow night. And then I'm going to take it down because this is a benefit of being a Cheerful Box subscriber. All my subscribers get this class. So if you want to watch it longer, you can always become a Cheerful Box subscriber. And you just go to cheerfulbaker.com, and that will take you right to my website, and you can go to the Cheerful Box. And so, not if you buy the one-time box, it's awesome, but the subscribers get my recipes and the 101 class that they can watch as long as they want. So I want to say hi to some of you all, and then we will get to watching the class. So a Facebook user said, hello, Lauren. So hello, Facebook user. I don't know who you are, but I'm glad you're on. I don't know if it's pretty where you all are, but man, it's beautiful in Kentucky. But one thing I would really love to know, what do you have the biggest problem with as far as royal icing? If it's consistency, put a C. Hey, Fresia. If it's consistency, put a C. I won't make you write that whole word out. If it is recipe, put an R, because I think that that's the two biggest ones. You're either unsure about the recipe or you're unsure about the consistency. So, or maybe you all are just great, and I hope you are. My thing for 2024 was to drink more water. So I'm so far so good. So C, what did I say C was? Consistency. Yes, consistency, I think. So is consistency the hardest thing for you all, or recipe? I have to tell you, when I first started making cookies, it took me quite a long time to master royal icing. So let's go ahead and just watch the video, shall we? And over mixing, that's a really good one. That is a really good one. And we will talk. I can't remember if I talk about this in the video or not, but you all can ask me questions while the video is going on, and I'll answer the questions. So let me go to the video and we can watch it. It's so funny because this video I did a couple years ago and I look totally different. My hair's all long. And so let's watch. So what we're going to do for this class, I'm going to start from the very beginning. I've already made the meringue powder. I'll go ahead and tell you what the ingredients of the meringue powder is. You can keep the meringue powder in the refrigerator. You don't have to. People always say, how long do you store the meringue powder? I go through it, but I've stored it for about 2 months. There's nothing in there that's going to go bad. But I do use one of those little descant things that, hold on just a second. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. I use one of those little things in there that take up the moisture, which I think probably helps a little bit. So the meringue powder, it's 3 cups of confectioner's sugar, and I just get cheap old Kroger confectioner's sugar. 1 cup of egg white powder, and I use Judy's egg white powder that I get from Amazon. 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar and 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. The cream of tartar helps the eggs to get volume, and the cornstarch helps the non-clumping of the meringue powder. So that's how I make the meringue powder. You can do all the ingredients together, and you can sift them 3 times with like one of these, which works great. Just put it through 3 times because you really want to mix the ingredients. The other thing that I do is I make it in a small food processor. That's a lot easier. So I just dump them in there, press it a couple times, pulse it, mix it together, keep it in a container. We're good to go. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to attempt to move this camera down so that you all can see my mixer. Here is my mixing bowl. And what I'm going to do is first...
Pon atención en la clase.
What? Okay, I'm going to add 5 tablespoons of my homemade meringue powder. Was that 5? I'm not sure. We're going to put in another one for good measure. But you're supposed 5 to 6. 5 is fine. And then we're going to add 6 tablespoons of meringue powder. Now I'm all nervous because my equipment didn't work, so I have to look. And then we're going to add our water. Yeah. And it's 6 tablespoons of meringue powder, 5 ounces of water. And then if you want to add flavoring, you would add it at this time. And I usually do 2 teaspoons of vanilla, but I'm not going to add that because I'm not going to actually use this royal icing for anything, so I don't want to waste my vanilla. So this is what it looks like. We're going to turn it on. And what I like to do first is I like to mix it just so that meringue powder and water get mixed together. Maybe 1 minute, and I'll show you what it looks like here in a second. Okay, so you all see how that's kind of frothy? Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 pounds of confectionery sugar. So I'm just going to add that in. And then when you mix this, you want to do it very slowly so you don't have a sugar explosion. So I always kind of pulse it until it starts to get mixed up. And I will, I'll show you what it'll look like here in just a second. So from start to finish, this takes about 4 minutes. So this is what it looks like. It's just mixed together, but it's not voluminous. Like you want it to look kind of like marshmallow fluff. So I'm going to keep mixing it. And it's also going to get a lot paler in color. It'll go from kind of a yellowish tint, I guess, to a real bright white. Now, Connie said earlier that she had a problem with icing being too airy. You do not want to mix this recipe, or really any royal icing, for longer than 4 to 6 minutes. Once it becomes more like marshmallow fluff, which I'll show you all that in a minute, you want to stop mixing. If you continue mixing, it won't look any different, but you'll incorporate way too much air. And then when you're decorating your cookie, you won't notice a difference until it dries. And it'll dry, it'll look like you have a little marshmallow kind of on top of your cookie. And that's just because you put too much air in your royal icing. And after I get my powdered sugar good and mixed, what I do is I turn my mixer up to high to let it finish. And we've probably been going, what, about 2 minutes or so?
Hey, Lauren, do you do the you said 4 to 6 minutes max.
So how long do you let it go on high? Does it really matter?
Probably maybe 3 minutes, not very
So
long.
get it mixed up really well and then let it go on high for a couple minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know that marshmallow thing because one time I left my icing mix for about 10 minutes. I forgot about it. Maybe it was 15 minutes. And I came down and I thought, no big deal. It didn't look any different. But as you found out, it dries differently when it's on your cookie.
Lauren,
So
can I ask if you're doubling, like I doubled a couple of my colors, does that matter at all in terms
double,
of preparation?
no. You mean you made a double batch of icing?
Yeah, sorry, I meant like I made a double batch of
it'll
icing.
take the same. It will not take longer if you make a double batch.
Okay.
So, do you see how this is real fluffy? Let me move it over here. I think you'll be able to see it better. You see how that's real fluffy? And there's real stiff peaks. That's finished. That didn't take long at all, right? Now, I'm going to show you something about this peak. Do you see how this peak right here is broken? If I were to, let me give you a better, I'm going to put my flattened spatula on here. That peak is really, really stiff. You could make, and there's some, I don't know if you can see on here, but there's some little ridges on it. That is really, really hard to use, hard on your hand. So this is the kind of consistency that you would use if you were making flowers, but you don't want to use this for piping because it will kill your hand. So let me tell you what I do next. What I would do next is I have these little containers. Let me get this so you all can see really well. Okay, so I have this container, and also about royal icing, you have to keep it covered because if you don't, it will dry out. And then when you mix it, it'll have little specks in it that will clog up your icing. So I usually will put, I have these little plastic lids that are great that will go over my mixing bowl, or you can use saran wrap, but you definitely want to make sure that you have it covered. And so I like to mix my icing in smaller bowls. So I'm just going to put some icing in here. And I'll put quite a bit just so you all can see it. Okay, so there's my really good icing. What I'm going to do next is I have this little cup that I love. It has a little spout. It's just a little measuring cup. And this is what I love to use when I'm mixing my icing. So I'm just going to add a little bit, probably a teaspoon. And I would say I have 2 cups of icing in this bowl. But I don't measure, I just look at what the icing looks like when I'm done mixing. So I'm going to show you all that. So I've added a little bit of water. And now, do you see how that peak, it's still sticking out, but it's falling just a little bit. It's falling over. Can you all see that? Let me see if I can get it. That is what I like to use when I'm piping. That's a good piping icing. It's still very thick, but the peak is falling over a little bit. When I pull the icing out of the bowl, there's a peak left in the bowl. That's good for piping. Now, this is kind of thick still. So let me add a little bit more water and show you what else you could use for piping in case that would hurt your hand. So I probably added another teaspoon. Now, when I pull this one out, that little peak there is really falling. It's really falling. You can still use that for piping. That's completely fine. As long as when you pull your knife out, you do not have icing that falls back down into the bowl, that's great piping icing. So now I'm going to show you all how to put the icing in a bag, because it's so funny. I think it was Connie. Somebody asked me, how do you put the icing in the bag without it squishing out? And
I had all this icing and I went, I'm going to be scraping. It's not going to work.
So what I do is I use, usually it's these little canning jars, and then I put my bags down in, and then I fold it over the canning jar. And then I will take my offset spatula, I'll plop it in there. Then I have all of this part of my bag that doesn't have any icing on it and that it's clean. So let me put this up just a little bit more.
Lauren, how much do you recommend in the bags? I think I was way overfilling mine.
You know what? I make cookies that are about 3.5 inches to 4 inches. And what I have found is with the amount of icing that I put on, it takes about 0.8 ounces of icing per cookie. So what I do is I'll look and I'll figure out, okay, let's say I'm making a bunch of Valentine cookies. Let's say I'm making a dozen of these cookies. And I know, okay, I need, 3/4 of that cookie is pink, right? So I'm probably going to need 6 ounces per cookie. Then I would probably make 4 ounces of pink. And the way I do that is with a little kitchen scale from Walmart. I just I would put this on the kitchen scale, and then I would put my bag and I would tear it out to 0. And as soon as I got to 4 ounces, I would stop. Is that helpful? I hope. If you do make too much icing, you can actually just put these bags in the freezer and take them back out and use them, which is awesome. Save them till next time. Now I'm going to show you all my favorite little tool ever. This is one of those tools that you use to put ties around. I think they use it for bread. You can order these from Amazon, and this is the greatest thing ever. You put your bag through it, and then your bag is tied. Isn't that wonderful? I love this.
That's awesome.
So that's my good little tool. I will have to look up the name of this because I can't remember what it's called, but it's just called a bag tie machine, and they're really inexpensive, and it's really a great time-saving tool. So we have our piping icing done, right?
I use that too.
Now we are going to do our flooding icing, and I'll show you all how to color your icing next. Okay, the reason I love these offset spatulas is because you can really go around the edge of your bowl and clean the sides, which I think makes it super, super easy. Now, let me tell you another little trick. Actually, hold on one second. I was talking about how you need to always keep your icing covered, and I haven't covered mine. So let me grab my cover for my icing, so it doesn't dry out. A good little trick is whenever you are making icing, take some of that really thick icing and put it in a separate bowl. Because if you add too much water and your icing is too thin, you can put some of that thicker icing down into your bowl and thicken it up. It's the easiest way to do it. You can add powdered sugar, but sometimes you can get clumps. So it's always better to just keep aside a little bit of that thicker icing. So I'm going to I like to add about a tablespoon at a time. And I know I'm not measuring, but I've done this so much. I about know what a tablespoon is. Now, what some people like to do, I'm going to show you all, is to get these little spray bottles, and you can spray your icing with water, and that's a good way to do it too, especially if you're unsure about how much water to add. You can use a spray bottle. Another really, really great thing to do, and you won't believe that this works, but it really works great, is if your icing is almost the consistency that you want it, you can actually pour water onto your icing. It doesn't really matter how much. And then you're going to pour the excess water off. And that is just going to put a real light coating of water on the top of your icing. And that's a good way to not add too much water. So I'm going to keep mixing this. And then there are two different ways that I measure the consistency of royal icing. One is by the plop test, which means how the icing plops off of my knife into the bowl. And the other way is by measuring the number of seconds that it takes the knife to go through the icing. So some people like their royal icing to be about 10 seconds, which means when you draw that line through and you count to 10, it's going to take 10 seconds for that line to close. I like my icing to be more like 15 seconds because that way it doesn't crater as easily in little small icing areas. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to add a little bit more icing. I'm going to mix it up. And let me pull my, okay, let me see if I can kind of do this sideways. When I take my spatula out, what I'm looking for is I want my icing to not completely run off my knife, but I want it to sort of plop off my knife. Did you all see that plop? It plops in the beginning and then it runs. Can you all see that? Now, if that's hard to see, let's run the icing through the center and count the number of seconds that it takes to close. Y'all ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now it's closed, but I counted a little bit fast. So can you see what I mean? When you pull your knife through, there's that line. Once you start counting, in between 10 and 15 seconds is the perfect consistency for icing that will spread out by itself. Another thing you can do is you can kind of wiggle the top of your knife onto your icing. And if it smooths out on its own, you know it's going to do that on a cookie. Now let's put way too much water in our icing. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to just put a whole bunch of water in there, because I think it's always good to see what happens when you put too much water. One thing you'll notice, there's a lot of bubbles in there. That's one thing that can happen if you add too much water. You'll get a lot of bubbles in your icing. But watch how quickly my line closes. Are you all ready? 1, 2, it's closed. What do you think would happen if you put this icing on a cookie? It would run right over the side, right? It's way too runny. Plus, it would probably crater in the center, meaning it would kind of sink down. It's not good. Now, watch when I pull my knife out. Do you see how it just runs off like water? Way too runny. So, anybody know how we would fix this? we're going to add thick icing.
Add thicker icing, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to grab a big old blob of my thick icing that I kept aside, and I'm going to mix it up to get it back to the consistency that I want. Now, if you do mix a lot and you have bubbles, what you can do is you can just let your icing sit for about 15 minutes and the bubbles will rise to the surface, and then you can just take a fork or a knife or your little spatula and you can just pop the bubbles. So let's see, this one, this is still really runny because I added so much water. So I'm going to add another blob, and then I'm going to put a little bit in a bag, and then we'll talk about coloring icing.
I saved hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Liberty, 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 liberty.
And it's so funny because after you make royal icing for a while, like I can tell just by putting my knife through it how, if it's the right thickness. Now, if you would have asked me 6 years ago if I'd ever been able to do that, I would have said no. But I can tell that it's plopping off of my spatula. When I lift it off, there's a little plop and then there's runs. So I know that this is right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my bag, and I like using bags from this company called Sinful Cutters. It's sinfulcutters.com. They're really good and the weight is awesome, and you can cut and use them as tipless bags, or you can use them with tips. I think they're awesome. So I'm going to put a little bit of my icing in there. And then when I lift it up, I have all of this area that is clean. And I usually will use small bags for piping icing and larger bags for flooding icing. If you don't have that size bag, then I will put 2 tabs on my flooding icing. And I do that because see how that kind of looks like an F? Did I mention I had a child with dyslexia? So we used to play all these little games on how to remember things. So I still do them. So I'll use that if I don't have different sizes of bags. Any questions about the consistency before we talk about the coloring?
Lauren, was that when you mixed that in the, you said you like to use the small plastic containers, was that a whole recipe that you mixed there?
No, I still have a ton left.
So you do it in batches?
Yes. Yep. I do it in batches. It's really hard, even if I need, let's say I'm making Valentine cookies and I only want red or I only want pink. I will actually mix the color into the big batch of icing. Otherwise, I always mix my icing in these smaller containers, even if I have to mix more, because for me, it's just so much easier to get the consistency right. Now, you can use whatever kind of food coloring you want, as long as it's gel.
Okay, you got
coloring that is water-based.
Hold on, I pushed the wrong thing. Okay. I'm back. So I cut it off there because the other day we talked all about color, and really I would have just repeated the same thing that I said the other day. So I hope that was helpful. Does anyone have questions about the video that they just saw? And let me just tell you all, you have to really play around with your icing. You will hear 1,000 different things about what kind of consistency to use. How many seconds. After a while, when you make cookies, you'll figure out what works best for you. For me, I like a little bit of a thicker flood.
Some people like a much thinner flood. And if you watch cookie decorating videos, you'll see that people use different types. I like a thicker flood because I like more icing on my cookies. And I think that it creates, the more icing you have on your, oh, let me take that back. If you don't have enough icing on your cookie, it's impossible to get a flat surface. You've got to make sure that you have plenty of icing on your cookie, because it will flatten out better and it will look a lot nicer. Someone just asked me what kind of meringue powder, and I just had some, and I must have put it in the other room. I was going to show you all. So I make my own meringue powder. I like the way that it tastes. It doesn't have any funky ingredients in it. It's dehydrated egg whites, powdered sugar, and a couple of other things. That's what I use. It's way cheaper to make your own. You make so much more for the amount of money that you spend if you buy meringue powder. Now, I do buy meringue powder because occasionally I like having a backup bag just in case if I get an extra order and I don't have the ingredients to make my homemade meringue powder. I always have a bag of meringue powder on as a backup. If you are in the Cheerful Cookie Club, then you get the meringue powder recipes, the royal icing recipe, and access to the Royal Icing One-on-One class for forever. If you want to purchase that recipe, I sell it on cheerfulbaker.com. You can find it there. And so that's what I use. I make my own meringue powder. But if I don't make it, I use Jeannie's Dream. And hold on. I swear it's in here. I got it in the mail today. And I ordered it from Amazon. And I can put a link to that in Amazon. I can put a link here in just a second to the Jeannie's Dream that I use from Amazon. Where do you purchase the powdered egg whites? I order those. The powdered egg whites I order from Amazon also. I use Judy's powdered egg whites. Sometimes I add I don't ever add Karo syrup, but sometimes I will add it's not Karo syrup. What is it? It's maybe it is. Hold on 1 second. I'll be right back. Well, I don't have it. I was hoping I could show it to you. It's not Karo syrup. What is it? It's somebody help me out. It's not Karo syrup that you use. I've had a long day. Occasionally I will put that in there because it helps the icing to sometimes dry a little bit thicker and have a softer bite. Hold on. Is it Karo syrup? Hold on 1 second. Corn syrup. Light corn syrup. Maybe that's the same as Karo syrup. Light corn syrup. I don't add it because it's just an extra ingredient. My homemade meringue powder does not give you a hard cookie, and neither does the Jeannie's Dream. If I make cookies, I usually try and make my cookies a day or two ahead of time. So really close if I have an order, because I like to give people very, very fresh cookies. If I have to make the cookies, if I have a really large order and I make them a week in advance, I do have like you can see it right there. See that huge thing back there? It's actually an airtight container that I can keep cookies in, but I will put the syrup in, the corn syrup in there, because the icing dries softer. It has a softer bite. And but normally I don't use it because it's just an extra ingredient that you have to add, and ingredients are expensive. So I'm sorry I couldn't remember. You all, I go to bed. What time is it? It's 7:30. I go to bed every night at 8:30 because I wake up between 4:30 and 5. So usually this late at night, my brain is not working. And I usually do my lives in the morning, but I realize not everybody is, people are working. So I thought I would do one at night. Let's see. Do you all want me to find the meringue powder real quick? And the one that I buy all the time. And let's see, because I just bought it. And I like also that you can buy it from Amazon because it comes in super quick. So it's called Jeannie's Dream, and I just found the link. So here, I just put the link in the comments so you all can see that. Let me look. Do you create a shiner? How do you create a shiner icing when dry? That is a great question. Let me tag that question. Okay. The best way to create a shinier icing, one, if you use corn syrup or Karo syrup, it does. Oh, an arrow occurred. It does create a little bit of a shinier cookie, but the best way to do it is to dry your cookie in front of a fan. I dry my cookies in a dehydrator. I put sheets on the bottom of the dehydrator so it actually the airflow comes from the back on mine, and it only goes over the top of the cookies. It does not dry the cookies out at all. And I put it on a very low temperature. I usually keep it around 65 because that's close to the temperature of my home. It's completely enclosed, so I don't have to worry about dust getting on the cookies. But it's just like you're putting a fan over top of a cookie. And you can do that, which will enable your cookies to dry faster. There is also this product I'll show you all. It's called PME Glaze Spray. And if you like a shiny cookie, this is the absolute greatest stuff ever. It makes your cookies so shiny and pretty. The only thing about this is it gets on everything. So when I use this, I have a dedicated PME pan, a cookie sheet that I put my cookies on when I spray it with this spray. It's totally edible. It does not change the flavor at all, but it makes them so beautiful. But it's hard to get it completely off. It's kind of sticky. So I will put those on my dedicated PME spray cookie sheet, and I'll spray them. You want to make sure that your icing is dry, but this is a great thing to use if you like that real shiny look. Let's see. Any other questions? I did add the link, but for some reason it's so weird. It says an error occurred. So maybe Facebook doesn't. I just tried doing it again. We'll see if they allowed it this time. Sometimes Facebook can be funny. Do I ever use flavors besides vanilla? Do you mean in my royal icing, do I ever add flavors besides vanilla? I don't personally, because I don't want the icing to overshadow the flavor of the cookie. If I'm going to flavor something, I'm going to flavor my cookie and just use vanilla icing. Occasionally, I will do a strawberry icing. And for the shiny stuff, yes, I'll look that up in a minute. Occasionally, I will do a strawberry icing, and I'll use dehydrated strawberries, ground up the powder, and it will make my icing pink. So I'll do all the cookies, like if I'm doing hearts for Valentine's Day, and it gives it a really good flavor. But otherwise, I just use vanilla. It's easier that way. Let me see if the PME spray is even on Amazon. PME spray, it is. I'm telling y'all, once you use it, it's just so addictive. Luster spray. Well, I'm trying to find it. Glaze spray. Huh. I don't see it on here. PME glaze spray. Glaze spray. I do not see it on Amazon. So you'll just have to put it in Google and find it that way. The last one that I bought, I actually bought at Cookie-a-thon, but this is what it looks like. PME clear edible glaze spray. This is what you use if you ever make candy, so it doesn't get cloudy. This is what you use, but it also works great on cookies. Do you ever use dye-free coloring? I do not use dye-free coloring. I have dye-free coloring that a friend of mine who uses dye-free coloring told me to buy. It's right here, Watkins Food Dye. I've never used it, but it is sort of a gel consistency. What I've heard is that you have to put in more. You can't get really bright colors. I honestly don't know. I've never used it, but that's the one that someone recommended to me. Was this one right here, the Watkins Food Coloring. On, what is today? Thursday. On Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember what day. If you look back on my Facebook, you will see I did a whole thing about color. I also did a blog post about color. So if you go to cheerfulbaker.com, I share the links for the colors that I use, and you'll be able to find that there. Let's see, any other questions? Excuse me. Let's see. It's so funny. I couldn't think of what Karo syrup was because I grew up. That's what I called it growing up. That's what you use to make fudge, right? Let's see. Do you use clear vanilla and icing? No, I don't. I don't think it. I think that is such a farce. Clear vanilla is much more expensive. I use regular vanilla, and my icing is as bright white as you can possibly get. So I have never fallen for that. Don't fall for that. Just use regular old vanilla and it will work just fine. Your icing, if your icing is not bright white, it means you're not mixing it long enough. Because if you only mix your icing for a couple of minutes, it's not going to be bright white. You've got to mix it for about 4 minutes. It'll get real fluffy, real white. It'll look like marshmallow fluff. If it doesn't, and if it's still off white, you just haven't mixed it enough. Let's see, any other questions? I think that's it. I'm looking back. Yeah, no, I've never used white coloring. Never found it necessary to do that either. There's my husband back there. Yeah, I've never used white coloring ever. So only to paint on cookies if I need to do white, like on top of black for a chalkboard or something like that. Anything else before we go? This is a longer one. Normally my lives are only 20 minutes, but 20 to 30 minutes. But this is a big topic. Am I right? So we had to talk about it a little bit longer. Let me look at my page and see what we're going to talk about tomorrow. First of all, if you go to my page, if you haven't signed up for Cookie-a-thon, make sure that you sign up for that. It's free. If you want access for it for forever, you can pay to have access. But if you want to watch it while it's going on, it's completely free. And it really is fantastic. They have so many wonderful tutorials. Tomorrow, let me see. I have to go back quite a ways. Tomorrow, I'm doing my cookie car, and it is so cute. It's in the other room too. It's in the kitchen. It is the car. It is the car for the most recent Cheerful Box, and I do it 2 different ways, and I love it. So I hope that you all will join me tomorrow at 1. Tomorrow will be at 1:00 that I'm going to go live. How long do you store your icing? You probably use it all. You can, if I do use it all, but if I don't, I store it in the freezer. And I would probably only store it for about 3 months. You might be able to store it longer, but I would be afraid that it would maybe get some of the flavors from the freezer. I don't know. I don't think I would store it longer than 3 months. If I am using it, I'll store it in the refrigerator for about a week and it'll be fine. But yeah, I do use it all. If I do have some extra, sometimes I'll make little royal icing transfers with the extra icing and then I'll save those. Um, and let's see. Yeah, the fridge, you can put it in the refrigerator and store it for about a week, or you can put it in the freezer. And if I put it in the freezer, sometimes I'll take a bag and really I'll just curl up the end of it, and put a little clip on it. And then I have a bag of icing in the freezer. I'll just plop that bag right in the freezer and I'll write the date on the icing bag with a Sharpie on the outside. If you do freeze it and even refrigerate it, you really want to mix it up again right before you use it. I mean, that really is important because even if I use icing, if I make it and use it the next day, I won't remix it. But if I use it, if I keep it for a couple of days, I will always take it out and remix it, especially with darker colors, because it never fails. You'll have some blob of color that has separated that will come out and ruin your beautiful cookie. And that's super depressing. So we talked about consistency. We talked about how to make icing. Someone asked in the beginning about how if you can mix your icing for too long, and I touched on that on the video. It makes me realize I need to make another video. I didn't realize how grainy that was. So that's going to be my goal to make. I think when I did that class, there was a thunderstorm and I didn't realize it's kind of grainy. So I need to do that again. But if you mix your icing for too long, it will not, it'll look fine and you'll think, I mean, like too long, like 10 or 15 minutes, and you'll use it and you'll think this is great. And then your cookie, it'll still taste good, but it will be like a marshmallow on top. It gets real funny and just strange. Let's see. I have icing in the bags. I store them for a couple of weeks. Is that okay? How do you store them, in the refrigerator or the freezer? I don't know that I would store them for a couple of weeks in the refrigerator. I would just pop them in the freezer because it's so easy to thaw them. They thaw super fast. Is there a difference in mixing your powdered sugar with the meringue powder and then the liquid versus meringue powder with the liquid first? That's a great question, Carolyn, because when I first started, I always mixed my meringue powder with my water, always, until it got really frothy and put in my powdered sugar. But occasionally you could, if you don't mix it well enough, you could get a little glob of unmixed meringue powder that could then clog up your icing bag. So now I mix my meringue powder, my powdered sugar, I mix that in my mixer and I put in my water. I've done it both ways. Honestly, both of them work. As long as you mix up your meringue powder and your water really well before you're adding your powdered sugar, I think that's completely fine. Do you ever get butter bleed showing in the icing when dried? I mean, I'm sure I have had butter bleed. I really don't, though. And one thing that I've read recently is that you want to make sure that your cookies are really good and dry and really, really good and cool. If you don't, you can have butter bleed. So I don't want to say never, but I rarely ever ice my cookies the day that they're baked. Hardly ever. I bake them. I make sure that when I cool my cookies, I put them on a cooling rack so that they get really, really good and cool. And then I put them in my little thing back there. And you know what that is? That is a Subway bread holder that I bought from someone that was selling a Subway store and painted it. But you can get those, you could keep them in your oven as long as you don't turn your oven on, or you could, however you want to keep them. But I always ice my cookies the day after they're made. And I think that that's why I don't have butter bleed. I've never known that, but I did read recently that that could be a reason. So we'll take one more question, and then it's time for me to go get ready for bed. Who else is a morning person besides me? Just me? Well, I guess y'all don't have any more questions. So thank you for joining. Be sure and join tomorrow. And go make some cookies. Cookies make people happy. And I appreciate all of you all watching, and have a great night. See ya. Bye.